When Zeus had brought Hector and the Trojans up to the Greek ships, he left both sides there to endure the unending struggle and tears, and turned his shining eyes away into the distance, where he concentrated his gaze on the lands of the horse-breeding Thracians, the Mysians who fight hand to hand, the lordly Hippomolgi who drink mare's milk, and the Abbey, the most civilized of men on earth. Not another glance of his bright eyes did he give to Troy. He did not expect that any of the immortals would come down to help either the Trojans or the Greeks. None of this had escaped the watchful eye of the earth-shaker, Lord Poseidon. He too had sat down high on the topmost peak of wooded Samothrace, and was watching the battle spellbound. From here the whole of Mount Ida, as well as Priam's town, and the ships of the Greeks could be seen. Sitting there after he had risen from the sea, he pitied the Greeks in their hour of defeat, and was enraged with Zeus. So now he strode at speed down the rocky slope. The high hills and forests shook under the immortal feet of the descending god. He took 3 strides, and with the 4th reached Aegae, his goal, where his impressive palace built of gleaming gold stands under the depths of the waters, and will stand forever. There he harnessed to his chariot his 2 swift horses with their hooves of bronze and flowing manes of gold. He dressed himself in gold, picked up his splendid golden whip, mounted his chariot, and drove out across the waves. The dolphins did not fail to recognize their master. On every side they emerged from their caves and gambolled at his coming. The sea made way for him in its delight. The chariot flew along, and the bronze axle remained dry below as his bounding horses carried him toward the Greek ships. Midway between Tenedos and rugged Imbros, there is a large cavern down in the deep sea. Here, Poseidon the earth-shaker unyoked and left his horses. He put ambrosial fodder down beside them and tied their legs with golden hobbles, which they could neither break nor shake off, to make sure they stayed there till their master's return. Then he made his way to the Greek camp. Here, like a high wind or a conflagration, the massed Trojans were sweeping on with implacable determination in the wake of Hector, son of Priam, shouting and yelling as one. They were now hopeful of capturing the ships and killing all of the best Greeks beside them. But at this moment Poseidon, the earth-shaker who encircles the world, emerged from the depths of the sea to put fresh heart into the Greeks. Borrowing the form and tireless voice of Calchas, he first addressed the 2 Ajaxes, both already intent on combat. Ajaxes, you 2 can save the Greek army if you fight with your old courage and entertain no cowardly thoughts of panic. The Trojans have climbed the Great Wall in force, but for all their invincible tenacity, I have no fears for the rest of the front, where the bronze-armoured Greeks will hold them all in check. It is here I dread disaster, where that rabid dog Hector, who boasts that his father was almighty Zeus, is leading their advance like a raging fire. If some god could only make you see that this is the place for you 2 to stand fast and rally the rest, you could still drive him off from your ships, for all his fury and the encouragement he gets from Olympian Zeus himself. The earth-shaker who encircles the world spoke, and, touching them with his staff, filled them both with resolution and energy, and banished the heaviness from their legs and arms. Then, like a swift hawk, which leaves its position high up on a rocky precipice, poises, and swoops to chase some other bird across the plain, Poseidon the earth-shaker disappeared from their sight. Of the 2 Ajaxes, it was swift Ajax, Oileus' son, who first knew him for a god. He immediately spoke to Ajax, son of Telamon. "Ajax, It was one of the gods that live on Olympus who urged us just now to fight by the ships. He took the prophet's form, but he was not Calchas, our prophet. His heels and the backs of his knees as he left us were proof enough for me. It's not hard to recognize a god. Not only that, but I feel a change in my heart. I'm much more eager to do battle and fight. My feet and hands are itching to be at them. Ajax, son of Telamon, replied to him and said, I feel the same. My mighty hands are itching on my spear. My spirit is roused, my feet are eager to be off. Single-handed, I'd be happy to meet Hector, son of Priam, in all his implacable determination. While the two Ajaxes were talking together in this way, savouring the will to fight, which the god had put into their hearts, Poseidon was stirring up the Greeks behind the lines, who were trying to recover their spirits beside their swift ships. They were not only weakened physically by complete exhaustion, but also demoralized at the sight of Trojans who had swarmed across the great wall in such numbers. When they looked at them, their eyes filled with tears, and they saw no hope of salvation. But now, with the ease of a god, the Earth-shaker went in among the ranks and urged them on. Teucer was the first he visited and roused, with Leitus, the warrior, Peneleos, Thoas, Dipyrus, and finally Meriones and Antilochus, champions of the battle cry. He urged them on and spoke winged words. Greeks, shame on you, young warriors! You are the very men on whose bravery I had relied to save our ships. If you give up because the fight is so desperate, the day for our conquest by the Trojans has indeed arrived. Well, well, what an astonishing sight, a fearful thing I never dreamt of seeing. The Trojans at our very ships. In the old days, they were like the cowardly does that trot through the woods in their weak and aimless way, food for jackals, panthers, and wolves, with no will to fight in them. That's how the Trojans used to behave, taking care never for a moment to stand up to any determined assault from us. But now they have left their town far behind them and are fighting by the hollow ships, all through the incompetence of our leader and the slackness of the troops, who are so disgusted with their leader that they would rather die beside their fast ships than defend them. Yet, even if the whole blame does rest with Agamemnon, son of Atreus, for insulting swift-footed Achilles, we have no excuse whatever for giving up the struggle. But brave men can recover. Let's be quick to put things right. For instance, it is not a pretty sight to see you, who are numbered among the best men in the army, slackening that fighting spirit of yours like this. I could forgive some feeble wretch for giving up the struggle, but you are different, and with you I quarrel heartily. You weaklings, this slackness of yours will make a bad situation far worse. Think, each of you, of the shame of your conduct, and how outraged others will be at it in a crisis like this, when Hector, master of the battle cry, has broken down the gate and the long bar and is fighting by the very ships. With these stirring words, Poseidon, who encircles the world, rallied the Greeks. Strong ranks formed up under the two Ajaxes, such as would have made the war god himself or Athene, who drives on armies, think twice. There stood the very pick of their best men, awaiting godlike Hector and the Trojans. An impenetrable hedge of spears and sloping shields, shield to shield, helmet to helmet, man to man. So close were the ranks that, when they moved their heads, their crested helmets with their shining plates touched, and the spears overlapped as they brandished them in their sturdy hands. Their minds were fixed on facing the enemy, and they were eager for the clash. The Trojans advanced in a mass, and Hector led them, sweeping forward like a boulder bounding down a rocky slope, when a river swollen by winter rain dislodges it over the edge of a plateau and washes away the little stones which hold the misbegotten thing. Leaping high in the air, it hurtles down through the echoing woods, and then runs on unchecked till it reaches level ground, where it stops rolling, much against its will. So Hector threatened for a while to reach the sea with ease through the Greek camp and ships, killing as he went. But when he ran into that solid block of men, he stopped short, hard against them. And the Greeks facing him lunged at him with their swords and curved spears and forced him to retreat. Shaken, Hector withdrew, but sent his voice ringing out to the whole Trojan army. "Stand by me, Trojans, Lycians and you Dardanians, that like your fighting hand to hand. The Greeks will not hold me up for long, packed together though they are like stones in a wall. They will give before my spear, if it is true I was brought here by the best of all gods, Hera's loud thundering husband." With these words he put fresh heart and courage into every man, and his brother Deiphobus fearlessly strode out among them, holding his rounded shield in front of him as he stepped carefully forward, advancing under its cover. Meriones let fly at him with a glittering spear, and he did not miss his man. He hit his rounded oxhide shield, but the long shaft, far from passing through, broke off at the socket. Deiphobus had held the leather shield at arm's length, being afraid of a spear from warlike Meriones. Meriones now retreated to his own contingent of warriors. He was enraged both at the loss of his broken spear and at missing a kill, and he went off at once to the Greek camp and ships to fetch the long spear that he had left in his hut. But the rest fought on, and the tumult of battle filled the air. Teucer, son of Telamon, was the first to kill his man, the spearman Imbrius, son of the horse owner Mentor. He had lived at Pedium before the Greek expedition came, and was married to Medesicaste, an illegitimate daughter of Priam's. Really? But when the Greeks arrived in their rolling ships... Wait, who? Oh, I see, Imbrius, not Teucer. I was really confused for a second there. But when the Greeks arrived in their rolling ships, Imbrius returned to Ilium, distinguished himself among the Trojans, and lived with Priam, who treated him like one of his own children. Teucer stabbed this man below the ear with his long spear, which he then pulled out. Imbrius fell like an ash tree that has stood as a landmark on a high hilltop until it is cut down by an axe and brings its delicate foliage to the ground. So Imbrius fell, and his ornate bronze equipment rang about him. Teucer ran up, eager to get his armour off, and as he did so, Hector let fly at him with his glittering spear. But Teucer was on the lookout, and managed by a hair's breadth, I hate that word, and managed by a hair's breadth to avoid the weapon, which struck Amphimachus's chest as he rushed into the fray. He thudded to the ground, and his armour clattered about him. As Hector dashed in to tear the close-fitting helmet from the great-hearted Amphimachus's temples, Ajax aimed at him with his glittering spear. But no part of his body was exposed. He was completely protected by his intimidating bronze armour, and all Ajax hit was the boss of his shield. Yet the force of the blow was so great that Hector had to give ground and leave the two dead men to be recovered by the Greeks. Amphimachus was conveyed into their lines by Stychius. Amphimachus was conveyed into their lines by Stychius and Menesthius, the Athenian leaders, while Ajax and Teucer, fired up with that fighting spirit of theirs, seized Imbrius's body. Like a couple of lions which have snatched a goat away from under the noses of the goatherd's sharp-toothed dogs and lift it clear of the ground as they carry it off in their jaws, over the dense bushes, so the helmeted Ajax and Teucer held Imbrius aloft and stripped him of his armour. And in his fury at Amphimachus's death, Ajax cut Imbrius's head. Oof! Ajax cut Imbrius's head from his soft neck, and with a swing sent it whirling like a ball through the crowd, to drop in the dust at Hector's feet. That's a little overkill there, Ajax. When Poseidon saw his grandson, Amphimachus, killed in the heat of the battle, he was bitterly angry, and went along by the Greeks' huts and ships to stir them up and make trouble for the Trojans. He met Idomeneus, the famous spearman. Idomeneus had been with a member of his own contingent who had just come out of the fight with a spear wound in the back of his knee. This man had been carried in by his comrades, and Idomeneus, after instructing the healers, was going to his own hut, with every intention of returning to the fight, when the Lord Earthshaker accosted him. Poseidon imitated the voice of Thoas, Andraemon's son, who ruled the Aetolians in Pleuron and mountainous Calydon, and was honoured like a god by the people. Idomeneus, adviser of the Cretans. What has become of all the threats that the Greeks used to make against the Trojans? Idomeneus, the Cretan leader, replied, Thoas, as far as I can see, no individuals are to blame. We all know how to fight. Nobody is paralyzed with fear or has run away from this horrible battle in panic. This is how Almighty Zeus must want it to be. The Greeks destroyed here, far from Greece, with no trace left. But you, Thoas, never waver in battle, and are good at inspiring others when you see them giving up. So don't slacken now. Give every man their orders. Poseidon, the Earthshaker, replied, Idomeneus, may the man who does not fight his best today never come home from Troy, but stay here to delight the dogs. Come, take your arms and follow me. We must get on with this business together, if the pair of us are going to be of any use. Even the poorest fighters turn into brave men when they stand side by side, and you and I know how to take on the very best. With these words the god went back again into the turmoil, and Idomeneus made his way to his well-built hut, put on his splendid armour, seized a couple of spears, and came out looking like the lightning that Zeus takes in his hand and discharges from glittering Olympus to flash into the distant sky as a sign for mankind. That was how the bronze gleamed on Idomeneus' chest as he ran. He had hardly left his hut when he was met by Meriones, his brave attendant, who had come to fetch a bronze spear. Powerful Idomeneus said, Dearest comrade in arms, son of my brother Molus, swift-footed Meriones, why have you left the battlefield to come here? Are you hit and in pain from a weapon? Or have you come with some message for me? I have no desire to sit in my hut myself, but am eager for the fight. Sensible Meriones replied, Idomeneus, adviser of the bronze-armoured Cretans, I've come for a spear, hoping to find one left in your hut. I broke the one I had when I hit the shield of proud Deiphobus. Idomeneus, the Cretan leader, replied, If it's a spear you want, you will find one, or 20, leaning against the white plastered wall by the entrance to my hut. They are Trojan spears. I take them from the men I kill. I don't believe in fighting the enemy at a distance, hence my collection of spears, embossed shields, helmets, and glittering armour. Sensible Meriones replied, I too have plenty of Trojan weapons in my hut, and my black ship, but not where I can pick them up at once, and I don't consider my courage has deserted me either. Whenever battle is joined where men win glory, I take my place in the front line. You are the last of the bronze-armoured Greeks I should have expected to be blind to my ability. You've seen it for yourself. Idomeneus, the Cretan leader, replied, No need for you to dwell on that. I know how brave you are, and how you would prove it if we were all being gathered by the ships for an ambush. There's nothing like an ambush for bringing a man's worth to light, and picking out the wretches from the brave. The wretch changes colour all the time, peering about him this way and that. He can't sit still for nervousness, but fidgets about. Shifting from one foot to the other, his heart thumps in his chest as he conjures up death's demons, and his teeth chatter. Meanwhile, everybody's dying. You might want to just hurry this along and get back. But the brave man never changes colour at all and is not unduly afraid from the moment he sets down in ambush with the rest. All he prays for is to come to grips with the enemy as soon as possible. At such a time, no one would find fault with your determination and tenacity. If you were hit in action by an arrow or spear, it would not be behind, on your neck or back, that it would fall. It would seek out your chest or belly as you rush forward into the intimacy of battle in the front line. But we mustn't stay here and chatter like little boys, finally. Or people may become resentful. Go into my hut and get yourself a spear. So he spoke, and Meriones, equal of swift Ares, snatched up a bronze spear from inside the hut and went after Idomeneus, fully intent on battle. The two were like murderous Ares and his son, fierce and indomitable rout, before whom the most resolute warrior turns tail. Setting out for the wars, they marched from Thrace to join the Ephyri, or the great-hearted Phlegians, to bring victory to one side and turn a deaf ear to the prayers of the other. So Meriones and Idomeneus, leaders of men, set out for the battle, bronze armour glittering. Meriones spoke his mind first. Idomeneus, son of Deucalion, at what point do you want to enter the fight? On our right, in the centre, or on the left? It's there, I imagine, the Greek defence is most likely to break down. Idomeneus, the Cretan leader, replied, There are others to look after the ships in the centre. The two Ajaxes are there, so is Teucer, the best archer we have, and a good man too, in a standing fight. Hector is fired up for battle, but they'll give him his fill of fighting, however formidable he is. Indeed, for all his desire to fight, he won't find it easy to overcome their determination and invincible tenacity, as he must before he sets the swift ships on fire, unless Zeus himself helps and hurls a flaming brand upon them. Great Ajax, son of Telamon, will never yield to any mortal man who eats the bread of Mother Earth and can be cut by bronze or brought down by a great boulder. Ajax would not give way even to Achilles, breaker of the battle line, or at any rate not in a standing fight, though neither he nor anyone else can run like Achilles. So let's make for the left here, and we'll soon find out whether we are going to yield victory to some other man or he to us. So he spoke, and Meriones led off in the direction indicated by Idomeneus, and they reached the front. When the Trojans saw Idomeneus come up like a fire in his courage, and his attendant with him, both in their ornate arms, they called to each other across the ranks to attack him in body, and mass battle was engaged by the sterns of the ships. As, on a day when the dust lies thick on the roadways, currents of air driven by howling winds raise a great, confused dust cloud, so the front lines massed. And in the chaos every man longed to kill his opponent with his sharp bronze spear. The battlefield of death bristled with the long flesh-cutting spears they wielded, and the eye was dazzled by the glint of bronze from the shimmering helmets, newly polished body armour, and gleaming shields as the two armies came together. None but the most stony-hearted man would have enjoyed the sight and not recoiled. So the mighty sons of Cronus, Poseidon and Zeus, took different sides and brought terrible sufferings on the warriors. Zeus had in mind a victory for the Trojans and Hector, with a view to honouring swift-footed Achilles. But he did not mean the Greek army to be utterly destroyed in front of Ilium. He was honouring Thetis and her strong-willed son. Poseidon, on the other hand, had emerged stealthily from the grey sea to join the Greeks and inspire them. It distressed him to see them being beaten by the Trojans, and he was furious with Zeus. Yet the two gods' descent and parentage were the same, though Zeus was the older and the wiser. For this reason, Poseidon was careful not to help the Greeks openly. He took the form of a man, and in that disguise kept moving about the army, urging the troops on. So the gods pulled alternately on the rope of this violent and evenly balanced battle to make it taut over the two sides. The rope was indestructible, and no one could break it, but it broke many men. Idomeneus, though he was no longer a young man, flung himself into the fight with a shout to his troops. He struck panic into the Trojans by killing Othryoneus, an ally who had joined them from Cabessus. Drawn by news of the war, this man was a newcomer to Troy, who had asked Priam for the hand of Cassandra, the most beautiful of his daughters. Instead of giving him gifts for his bride, he had promised to do great things and drive the Greeks from his shores, whether they liked it or not. Old Priam, accepting the offer, had promised him his daughter's hand, and it was on this understanding that Othryoneus took part in the fighting. But now Idomeneus let fly at him with a glittering spear and caught him as he swaggered about. The bronze body armour he was wearing did not serve him well. The spear struck him in the middle of his belly, and he thudded to the ground. Idomeneus triumphed over him and said, "Othryoneus, I congratulate you on your betrothal to Priam's daughter, subject, of course, to your part of the contract being duly fulfilled. We too could do business with you on the same lines. We will send over to Greece for the loveliest of Agamemnon's daughters and make her your bride, if you will help us sack the prosperous citadel of Ilium. Step this way with me to our seafaring ships, where you can come to terms about your marriage. You will find our price for brides is not exorbitant." I'm struggling today. With these words, the warrior Idomeneus took him by the foot and began to drag him away through the thick of the action. But now Asius came to the rescue. He was on foot in front of his chariot, which the charioteer kept so close to him that the horses were breathing down his neck. Asius did his best to kill Idomeneus, but Idomeneus was too quick for him. He stabbed him with his spear in the throat under the chin and drove the point right through. Asius crashed down as an oak crashes down, or a poplar, or a towering pine, which woodsmen cut down in the mountains with their newly sharpened axes to make timbers for a ship. So Asius lay stretched in front of his chariot and horses, gurgling and clutching at the bloody dust. His charioteer, losing such wits as he possessed, had not even the presence of mind to turn his horses round and slip out of his enemy's hands. Resolute Antilochus pinned him with a spear through his middle. Again, the bronze body armour he was wearing did not serve him well. The spear struck him in the middle of his belly. With a gasp he fell headlong from the well-built chariot, and Antilochus, son of great-hearted Nestor, drove his horses out of the Trojan and into the Greek lines. Deiphobus, distressed at Asius's death, came up close to Idomeneus and let fly with a glittering spear. But Idomeneus was on the lookout and avoided the bronze spear by sheltering behind the rounded shield he always carried. It was built of concentric rings of oxhide and of glittering bronze, and was fitted with a couple of cross struts. He crouched under cover of this, and the bronze spear flew over him, drawing a hollow note from the shield as it grazed its edge. But the spear had not flown from Deiphobus's strong arm for nothing. It struck Hypsenor, son of Hippasus, shepherd of the people, in the liver under the midriff, bringing him down at once. Deiphobus boasted of his triumph over him in a loud voice. "So Asius does not lie unavenged. Even on his way to the mighty gatekeeper Hades, I feel he will travel with a light heart, now I've given him an escort." So he spoke, and his boasting stung the Greeks. It went straight to the heart of warlike Antilochus in particular, who, for all his sorrow, did not forget his comrade, but ran to stand over him and cover him with his shield. Then 2 of their trusty men, Mecisteus and worthy Alastor, lifted him from the ground and carried him off to the hollow ships, groaning heavily. But Idomeneus was still brimming with energy. His one desire was to bring black night down on a Trojan's eyes, or to thud to the ground himself in saving the Greeks from destruction. His next victim was the warrior Alcathous, son of Icytes, and son-in-law of Anchises, whose eldest daughter, Hippodamia, was his wife. Her father and lady mother at home adored her. Indeed, there were no other women of her age with such beauty, skill, and intelligence. So the best man in broad Troy had married her, the man Poseidon now killed at Idomeneus' hand. Poseidon put Alcathous in a trance, and so shackled his limbs that he could neither retreat nor leap aside, but was standing there motionless, like a gravestone or tall leafy tree, when the warrior Idomeneus stabbed him with his spear full in the chest and smashed through his bronze armour. Up to this moment it had saved him from death, but now it rang out drily as the spear cut through. Alcathous thudded to the ground. The spear was fixed in his heart, and its dying palpitations shook the spear to the very butt, till at last the imperious war-god Ares stilled its force. Idomeneus boasted of his triumph over him in a loud voice. "Deiphobus, do we reckon my 3 victims are a fair exchange for the one you were boasting about so much? Come on, you lucky fellow, tackle me yourself, and learn the quality of one of Zeus's offsprings who is visiting your land. It was Zeus who established our line. He first fathered Minos, lord of Crete. Matchless Deucalion was Minos' son, and I am Deucalion's lord over many people in broad Crete. And now my ships have brought me here to bring trouble on you and your father and everyone in Troy." So he spoke, and Deiphobus' heart was torn whether to retreat and call on one of his great-hearted compatriots for support, or to see what he could do alone. Deciding that he had better look for help, he went after Aeneas, and found him standing idle behind the lines. Aeneas always bore godlike Priam a grudge because Priam gave him such little respect, though he was as good a man as any. Deiphobus went up to him and spoke winged words. "Aeneas, adviser of the Trojans, you're badly needed for the rescue of Alcathous, your brother-in-law. If you care for your family at all, come and help me save your sister's husband, who lived in your house and looked after you as a child. The great spearman Idomeneus has just killed him." So he spoke, and his words went straight to the heart of Aeneas, who went after Idomeneus, fully intent on battle. But Idomeneus was not to be scared off like a little boy. He waited for him like some mountain boar, confident in his strength, who faces a crowd of huntsmen advancing on him in a lonely spot. His back bristles, his eyes flame like fire, and he sharpens his tusks, eager to take on men and dogs. So the great spearman Idomeneus awaited the onslaught of Aeneas and gave no ground at all. But he did call for support, looking especially to Ascalaphus, Apharius, and Dipyrus, as well as Meriones and Antilochus, champions of the battle cry. Calling on them, he spoke winged words. "Here, friends, help! I'm alone and in fear of an attack from swift-footed Aeneas, who is making for me now. He is a mighty killer in a fight, and he has the great advantage of youth. If our ages were matched, as our courage is now, there would soon be a triumph for Aeneas or myself." So Idomeneus spoke, and, united in their resolution, his companions all closed in and rallied round him, crouching behind sloped shields. But Aeneas, on his side, also called upon his friends, looking for help to Deiphobus, Paris, and godlike Agenor, his fellow leaders in the Trojan army. The troops backed him too, like sheep following the leader of the flock, from the pasture to drink at a stream, delighting the shepherd. So Aeneas was pleased to see the body of men behind him. They now fought at close quarters over Alcathous's body with their long spears, and the bronze armour rang intimidatingly on their chests as they aimed at each other across the ranks. But there were two warriors, Aeneas and Idomeneus, equals of Ares, who surpassed all the rest in their desire to slice into each other's flesh with their cruel spears. Aeneas threw at Idomeneus first, but Idomeneus was on the lookout and avoided his bronze spear, which flew by and hit the ground, quivering. It had leapt from his strong hand for nothing. Then Idomeneus threw. He hit Oenomaus full in the belly, smashing a plate in his armour, and his bowels gushed through. That is disgusting. Idomeneus dragged his long-shadowed spear out of the body, but overwhelmed as he was by missiles, was unable to strip the man's fine arms and armour from his shoulders. He was no longer quick enough to dash in and recover his own throw or avoid someone else's. And being too slow on his feet to save his life by running, he fought where he stood, and so kept death at bay. Now as he moved slowly off, Deiphobus, who continued to bear a grudge against him for his taunts, hurled his glittering spear at him. For the second time he missed Idomeneus, but the spear hit Ascalaphus, a son of Ares. The heavy weapon went right through his shoulder, and he fell in the dust and clutched at the ground. But it was only later that his imperious father, deep-voiced Ares, heard that his son had fallen in the thick of the action. At the moment he was sitting high up on Olympus under the golden clouds, where he was detained by the plan of Zeus, together with the rest of the immortal gods, for whom the war was also out of bounds. It was now over Ascalaphus that they fought each other at close quarters. Deiphobus had just torn the glittering helmet from his head when Meriones, equal of swift Ares, leapt in and struck his arm near the shoulder with a spear. The helmet with its heavy visor dropped from his hand and fell to the ground with a clang. And like a vulture, Meriones swooped in again, withdrew the weighty spear from his arm, and then retreated to his own contingent of warriors. Polites, Deiphobus's brother, putting his arm around his waist, supported him out of the battle and brought him to his swift horses, who were waiting for him behind the fighting with their charioteer and his decorated chariot. They carried him off to the town, groaning heavily and racked with pain, blood pouring from the fresh wound in his arm. But the rest fought on, and the tumult of battle filled the air. Aeneas now charged in and with his sharp spear stabbed Apharius, who was facing him, in the throat. The man's head jerked backwards. He crumpled up under his shield and helmet, and heart-crushing death engulfed him. Meanwhile, Antilochus, seizing a moment when Thoon's back was turned, I don't actually know how to pronounce that, but we'll go with that, leapt in and stabbed him. He sheared off the whole vein, that runs up the back to the neck. Thoon dropped backwards in the dust, stretching his hands out to his comrades in arms. Antilochus fell on him and began to strip him of his armour, but kept a sharp lookout for the Trojans starting to come up on every side. They stabbed at his broad and glittering shield, but they could not so much as scratch the smooth skin of Antilochus's neck with their cruel spears, for this son of Nestor's was protected by Poseidon the earth-shaker, even under a hail of spears as fierce as this. Unable to shake off his enemies, Antilochus wheeled round to face them, now on this side, now on that. His spear was never still for a moment, but shook as he brandished it, threatening to throw it at a distant opponent or lunge at close range. Antilochus was just preparing to throw into the crowd when Adamas, son of Asius, who had watched for the chance, leapt in and stabbed at the centre of his shield with his sharp spear. Sable-haired Poseidon denied it Antilochus's life and blunted its force, with the result that half of it stuck in the shield like a charred stake, while the other half fell to the ground. Adamas retreated into his own contingent of warriors to avoid death. But Meriones followed him as he withdrew and hit him with his spear between the navel and genitals. Ouch! Where death in battle comes most painfully to wretched mortals. There the spear went home, and Adamas, collapsing, writhed round it, as a wild mountain bull twists about when herdsmen have caught and roped it, and bring it in against its will. So the stricken fighter writhed, but not for long, only till the warrior Meriones came up and pulled the spear out of his flesh, and then darkness engulfed his eyes. Helenus then closed with Diparis, and struck him on the temple with his big Thracian sword, slicing through his helmet strap. The dislodged helmet fell to the ground, and was picked up by a Greek as it rolled among the fighter's feet. Black night came down and engulfed Diparis's eyes. Menelaus, master of the battle cry, was distressed when he saw this, and made for the warrior lord Helenus with a menacing shout, brandishing a sharp spear. Helenus drew his bow, and the two were ready to let fly at the same moment, one with a sharp spear, the other with an arrow from the string. Helenus struck Menelaus' chest with his arrow on a plate of his body armour, but it ricocheted off, as black beans or chickpeas on a broad threshing floor leap from the flat shovel with the whistling wind, and the winner was forced behind them. So the painful arrow ricocheted off Menelaus' body armour and flew away into the distance. But Menelaus, master of the battle cry, struck Helenus on the hand, in which he was holding his polished bow, and the bronze spear went clean through his hand into the bow. Helenus retreated into his own contingent of warriors to avoid death, with his hand hanging down at his side and dragging the ash spear along. The spear was withdrawn from his wound by great-hearted Agenor, who bound up the hand with a sling made of twisted wool, which his attendant was able to give him. Peisander now made straight for illustrious Menelaus. It was an evil destiny that led him on this path, with death at the end of it. Death, Menelaus, in the heat of battle with you. When the two men had come within range of each other, Menelaus missed. His spear swerved wide. Peisander stabbed the shield of illustrious Menelaus, but was unable to drive the spear through. The broad shield held it up, and the spear snapped at the socket. Peisander was delighted at the hit, scenting victory, but now Menelaus drew his silver-riveted sword and charged him. Peisander, from under his shield, brought out a fine bronze axe with a long, smooth haft of olive wood. They met, and Peisander hit the ridge of Menelaus' helmet on the top, just below the horsehair plume. But Menelaus caught Peisander as he charged at him, on the forehead above the base of the nose. Oh my god, right through the eye bit. Oof, okay. Anyway, the bones cracked and his eyes, all bloody, dropped in. No, not again. Dropped in the dust at his feet. He doubled up and fell. Menelaus put his foot on his chest, stripped off his armour and spoke in triumph. That's how you'll be retreating from the Greek ships, you insolent Trojans, always spoiling for a fight. Not that you are amateurs in other forms of abusive and shameful behaviour. Look at how you abused me, you dirty dogs, when you broke the laws of hospitality and defied the wrath of loud-thundering Zeus, protector of guests, who is going to bring Ilium tumbling down before long. You stole my wife and sailed away, and much of my wealth for no reason at all. Well, there was one reason, Paris, and he was the only one that did it. since you had been hospitably treated in her palace. And now you won't be satisfied till you have sent our seafaring ships up in flames and slaughtered us. You're spoiling for a fight, but one day you'll be stopped. Ah, Father Zeus, they say you are wiser than any man or god. That would be my washing machine, sorry. And all this is your doing. You are so indulgent towards the Trojan bullies, who have a passion for evil and an insatiable desire for the din of battle, that great leveller. People tire of everything, even of sleep and lovemaking, of sweet music and the elegant dance. Everyone would far rather satisfy themselves with these things than war, but the Trojans are gluttons for it. With these words, matchless Menelaus stripped the blood-stained armour from the body and gave it to his men. Then he went and engaged once more with the front ranks. No sooner was he there than he was attacked by Harpalion, son of Lord Pylaemenes, who had come with his father to the Trojan war, never to return to his own country again. Closing with Menelaus, Harpalion thrust at the centre of his shield with a spear, but being unable to drive the spear through, he retreated into his own contingent of warriors to avoid death, keeping a lookout on every side for any missile that might come his way. As he withdrew, Meriones shot him with a bronze-headed arrow and hit him in the right buttock. The arrow went clean through his bladder and came out under the pubic bone. Great! Harpalion collapsed at once, gasped out his life in the arms of his friends, and lay stretched out on the ground like a dead worm. That's a really lovely description. While the dark blood poured out of him and soaked the earth. Gathering round him, the great-hearted Paphlagonians. Gathering round him, the great-hearted Paphlagonians lifted him into a chariot and with heavy hearts drove him to sacred Ilium. His weeping father went with them. There was no compensation for his son's death. But the slaughter of Harpalion roused Paris to anger, since this Paphlagonian had been his guest, and he shot an arrow in fury for his friend. There was a Greek called Ulkenor, son of the prophet Polyidus, a man of substance and good birth who lived in Corinth. When he embarked for Troy, he knew well enough the grim fate that awaited him, since his old father, good Polyidus, had often told him he must either die in his bed of a painful disease or sail with the Greeks and be killed at Troy. So he went, avoiding the heavy forfeit the Greeks would have demanded for not serving, and saving himself from hateful illness and the pain he did not wish to bear. Paris now hit him with his arrow under the jaw and ear. Life left his limbs at once, and hateful darkness engulfed him. So they fought on like blazing fire, but Hector, dear to Zeus, who had not been kept informed, had no idea that on the left of the ships his troops were being slaughtered by the Greeks. Indeed, the Greeks came close to winning. So effectively did Poseidon, the earth-shaker who encircles the world, inspire them, besides putting his own efforts into their defence. So Hector was still on the attack in that part of the front, where he had first broken the shield-bearing Greek ranks and stormed the gate and wall, and where the ships of Ajax, son of Oileus, and Protesilaus were drawn up on the shore of the Grey Sea. There the protecting wall had been lower than elsewhere, and the Greek infantry and chariots were putting up the fiercest defence. The troops at this point, the Boeotians, the Ionians with their long tunics, the Locrians, Pythians, and splendid Eleans, had the utmost difficulty in holding off godlike Hector's attack on the ships, and were quite unable to thrust him back. He came at them like fire. Picked men from Athens were fighting here, led by Menestheus, supported by Phaedrus, Stichius, and brave Bias, while the Eleans were commanded by Meges, Amphion, and Dracius, and the Phthians by Medon and resolute Podarces. One of these, Medon, was a bastard son of godlike Oileus, so a brother of Ajax. But he had been exiled for homicide and lived in Phylace, having killed a kinsman of his stepmother, Eriopis, the wife of Oileus. Podarces, the other, was a son of Iphiclus, the son of... Why are you doing this to me again, Homer? Was a son of Iphicus, the son of Phylacus. These two, in their full armour, were fighting to defend the ships in front of the Phthians, and side by side with the Boeotians. Ajax, swift son of Oileus, was never separated, even for a moment, from Ajax, son of Telamon, as a pair of dark-faced oxen strain at the jointed plough in a fallow ground, each as hard as the other, with the sweat pouring out at the base of their horns, and separated only by their polished yoke. They press on, down the furrow, till they reach the turning point at the end of the field. So these stood alongside each other, cheek by jowl. The son of Telamon was backed by a fine, strong body of men who relieved him of his shield when he was overcome by heat and fatigue, but the great-hearted son of Oileus was not accompanied by his Locrian troops, who had no stomach for the standing fight, since they did not possess appropriate arms, bronze helmets with crests, rounded shields and ash spears. They relied on bows and slings of well-twisted wool. It was with these weapons that they had followed their leader to Ilium, and after their arrival used them extensively to break through the Trojan ranks. So now, while the troops in their ornate armour engaged the Trojans and bronze-clad Hector in the front line, the Locrians kept shooting at them from well out of sight in the rear. The Trojans, thrown into confusion by the arrows, began to lose their will to fight. They would have made a miserable retreat back from the Greek ships and huts towards windswept Ilium, had not Polydamas gone up to daring Hector and said, "Hector, you are an obstinate man when it comes to taking good advice. Just because the god gave you uncommon fighting ability, you like to think you know better than anyone else about tactics too, but you cannot possibly take responsibility for everything. The god gives men differing gifts. One man can fight, another dance, another sing poetry to the lyre, and yet another is endowed by far-thundering Zeus with a good brain, to the advantage of many of his friends. It saves them from disaster time and again, as he knows even better than they do. However, I will tell you what I think best. The fighting has blazed up all round you in a ring. Our great-hearted men certainly stormed the wall, but having done so, some are now standing idle under arms, while others are scattered among the Greek ships and fighting against odds. So withdraw, and call in all your best men. We could then consult and settle the whole question whether to fall on their ships, if the god wishes to give us a decisive victory, or failing that to withdraw from them intact. I, for one, am afraid the Greeks are going to pay us back for what we did to them yesterday. They have got a man biding his time beside their ships who is insatiable for battle, and I can't believe he will keep out of the fighting altogether." So spoke Polydamas, and his timely advice seemed excellent to Hector. He replied and spoke winged words. "Polydamas, stay here and keep all the best men round you, while I go and deal with the situation over there. I shall soon be back when I've given them my orders." He spoke and sped away, looking like a snow-capped peak, and as he passed swiftly through the Trojan ranks and those of their allies, he shouted to his men. They all ran up when they heard Hector's voice and massed themselves round Panthous' son, amiable Polydamas. But Hector went up and down the front line looking to see if he could find Deiphobus, strong Lord Helenus, Adamas, son of Asius, or Asius himself, son of Hirticus. He found not one of them alive or uninjured. 2 had fallen to the Greeks and lay dead by the sterns of the ships, while the others were back within the town wall, wounded at long or short range. But he did find one man quickly enough, on the left flank of the battlefield, with all its tears, and that was godlike Paris, husband of lovely-haired Helen. Paris was encouraging his men and urging them into battle. Hector went up to him and insulted him. "Paris, you parody, with your wonderful looks, you sex-crazed seducer. Where, I ask you, are Deiphobus and strong Lord Helenus, Adamas son of Asius and Asius son of Hirticus? And where, please, is Orthrioneus? This is indeed the end of steep Ilium, from top to bottom. There is nothing for you now but death." Godlike Paris replied, "Hector, you're blaming an innocent man in your rage. If I have ever shrunk from fighting, my mother still did not bear an utter coward. And from the moment you told your men to attack by the ships, we've held our ground here and kept the Greeks engaged relentlessly. The friends you ask about are killed except Deiphobus and strong Lord Helenus, who have withdrawn. Each was wounded by a long spear in the arm, but Zeus saved their lives. Lead us now wherever you wish. We'll follow you, with a will, and, I think, with no lack of courage either, so far as we are able. What a man cannot do, however committed, is fight beyond his ability." With these words, the warrior Paris pacified his brother, and they went off together into the sound and fury of the battle, which was raging now round Cebriones and matchless Polydamas. I keep saying that wrong. Polydamas. Phalces, Orpheus, godlike Polyphetes, Palmis, and Ascanius and Morris, who had arrived as replacements from fertile Ascania on the morning of the previous day, and now Zeus inspired them to fight. The Trojans came on like an angry squall that swoops down from Zeus's thunder-laden sky. It throws the ocean into indescribable turmoil, where innumerable waves of the sounding sea hiss and arch their foaming backs in a never-ending procession. So the Trojans came on behind their leaders, rank after rank, glittering with bronze, and with Hector, equal of the murderous war god Ares, at their head. In front of him he held his rounded shield with its close layers of hide and covering of beaten bronze, and his gleaming helmet nodded on his temples. Hector sprang forward and probed the enemy line at various points in the hope that it would break before him as he charged under the cover of his shield. But he did not shake the Greek's resolution. Ajax first challenged him, striding confidently forward. "Brilliant Hector! Do come closer. Why are you trying to terrify the Greeks like this? We do know something about war. It is just that we have been under Zeus's evil whip. I suppose you imagine you're going to destroy our ships? But we too have hands ready to fight for them, and likely to capture your fine town and sack it long before you get our ships. As for you, I say the time is drawing near when you will take to your heels and pray to Father Zeus and the other gods to make your lovely maned horses faster than falcons as they carry you back home to Ilium in clouds of dust." As he spoke, a bird flew by on the right, a high-soaring eagle. The Greek troops were heartened by the omen and shouted for joy, but glorious Hector replied, "Ajax, you've got it wrong, you great oaf. What are you talking about? If only I could be as certain of spending my days as the son of Zeus who drives the storm cloud, with the lady Hera as my mother, and be honoured as Athene and Apollo are honoured, as I am of this day proving disastrous to the Greeks. All of them. You'll die with the rest of them, if you dare to stand up to my long spear, which is going to feast on your lily-white skin. Yes, you'll fall by your own ships, and your flesh and fat shall glut the Trojan dogs and birds of prey." With these words Hector led off, and his men came after him with a mighty roar, while the whole force behind them took up the cry. The Greeks answered with their own war cry, and summoning up their courage, awaited the onslaught of the Trojans' best. The clamour from the two armies reached the upper air and the very eye of Olympus.